Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to today's webinar from Digitize Swift Kanban. Today's topic is safe versus Kanban, and I think it is a topic that is of a lot of interest to a great many people, and we've had a tremendous interest in the webinar today. I'm hoping that we're going to see a great attendance and also a great discussion after the webinar is done, at the end of the webinar, that is. So let's get started while people are still joining. Just some housekeeping initially. We'll start with some introductions. I'll give you a quick word about Swift Kanban and Digite and Swifties, one of our other products. Now today is Kanban, and the speaker, of course, is Travis Birch. Let's get past this slide. And just some housekeeping. We will be recording the webinar, and we'll make a copy of the recording available to you after the webinar is done. We will take questions via the Q&A box that is on the right side of your screens. Please feel free to enter questions at any time during the webinar, and we will take the questions towards the end. So let me introduce Travis Birch. He's a partner at Bertie, and he's also a accredited Kanban trainer, a Kanban coaching professional, and a SAFE program consultant. And I can think of no one better than him to be talking on this topic. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm co-founder and responsible for marketing at Digite. Just to give you a little bit more about Travis, I met him probably a couple of years back during the Lean Kanban North America conferences, and I've heard him speak on a number of occasions. He's a tremendous conference speaker and gets a great response to his sessions. He's truly experienced in this field, implementing both Kanban and SAFE at program level in large organizations. He's had more than a decade of experience helping organizations become fit for purpose, helping leaders and teams achieve business agility, fitness and survivability, customer focus, service orientation, sustainability, flow of customer value, and continuous improvement. So Travis, a warm welcome to you, and I'll hand over the mic to you in just a second. Let me just quickly go through a couple of slides about Digite for those of you who may not know us. We've been around for about over 15 years in the business of web-based collaborative products and solutions, especially helping distributed teams manage a variety of different projects and engagements. We're headquartered in Cupertino, California, and we have offices in multiple locations around the world. We have nearly 1 million users of our products using us in a variety of different contexts. We cover Lean Kanban, Agile, application lifecycle management, project portfolio management, scale Agile, etc. And our two main products which are of relevance in today's topic is Swift Kanban, which is our enterprise Kanban product, and Swift Ease, which is our SAFE related product for supporting teams that are implementing SAFE. Just to give you a quick idea about these, clearly software and IT are our biggest customer use case for our Kanban product. We have a very powerful portfolio management capability along with our enterprise services planning features that we provide on our Swift ESP module that rides on top of Swift Kanban. And we have a range of different ways in which you can model your portfolios using our Swift Kanban product, and then use it for risk management, for demand shaping, and capacity planning using our Swift ESP on top of Swift Kanban. We're very well known for some of the analytics that we provide on top of this, which helps you implement the Kanban method very effectively. And similarly, Swift Ease, which is enterprise agility with SAFE, helps you really manage all levels of SAFE depending on the level at which you are implementing. We provide some really nice capabilities in terms of visualizing your different levels of SAFE and building dependencies across them during your PI planning process, and really helping distributed teams work together during that big room planning session. A lot of our customers really like some of these capabilities. And then, of course, we provide a lot of the hierarchy capabilities similar to our product in Kanban that help you build the various levels of SAFE implementation that you might be doing. And just a final slide here on the customers that we have. You'll probably recognize some good brand names here. And we have customers ranging from tens of thousands of users to some very small 50 to 100 users. So really our products are able to scale both on SaaS as well as on on-premise installations. So with that, let me just go ahead and make you presenter. And there you go.
So yes, thank you very much, Mahesh. Good morning, everyone from Toronto. I want to start with a bit of a caveat for today's session by stating simply that SAFe versus Kanban isn't really what we're talking about, right? So what do I mean by that? SAFe and Kanban are not in competition with each other, right? It's not a contest. Instead, we're using versus as, okay, let's compare, let's look at the differences, and let's see how they complement each other, how they can be used in combination. And the purpose of the presentation today is to give you an overview of both in light of specific challenges that you're trying to address in your own business context. So it's mostly a very general overview. Of course, you can't talk about everything. We have limited time. I have been somewhat selective necessarily in terms of what I'm focusing on today. And hopefully it will provide you with some useful information, perhaps some insights, perhaps even some ideas for what you can bring back to your organization and try to do something about the challenges that you face and the improvements that you want to make. So let's look at the agenda. I'm going to give a very simple introduction about myself, and then we're going to talk about this concept of agility at scale. And, you know, it's a very hot topic, and it's been around for a while. And so I think it's important for us to establish you know, what is the root of all of this? Why are we trying to scale agility? And that's going to kind of set the stage for the solutions or the contributions of both SAFe and Kanban towards addressing this challenge of agility at scale. And then we should have some time for questions at the end. All right, I'm not looking at the comments or anything, so Mahesh or anyone, if you want to interrupt me, if you feel that there's some good reason to stop, and
I'll take care of that.
Yeah, just go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Okay, so as Mahesh was saying, I am a partner with Vertigue. We're a small boutique management consulting and training firm here in Toronto. My new badge hasn't arrived yet, but the Kanban Coaching Professional program has been rebranded as Accredited Kanban Consultants. So KCPs will now be referred to as AKCs, and I think that was just announced at the Lean Kanban India conference, if I'm not mistaken. And you know, also have a background in Scrum and SAFe. Okay, so let's talk about this challenge of agility at scale. Why do we need it in the first place? and what problems are we trying to solve? So my assertion is that the challenge we're trying to address here is the complex nature of organizations, and in particular, professional services, knowledge discovery businesses, right? And so our organizations are complex adaptive systems, and this makes knowledge work very difficult to manage. So we have been doing a lot of work over the past decades to try to make knowledge work easier to manage, to try to do it better and better, because it is so difficult, because it is complex and adaptive. And the nature of complexity is such that you don't really know what is going to happen until you actually do it and see what happens, right? So in other words, the observed behavior of individual parts is not predictive of the behavior of the whole system, right? So we can't look at a team and say, this is how the organization is going to deliver to customers, right? This is how we're going to make everything work better. We're going to take something like Scrum, that's a team management framework, and we're going to apply it to the organization as a whole, and everyone's just going to do Scrum, and that's the answer, right? It doesn't work because of the nature of complex adaptive systems. And so, for example, these sharks instinctively understand that this school of fish does not behave as one giant fish, right? And so the shark is able to hunt these fish because it has an instinctive sense of the behavior of the complex adaptive system of the school of fish. Another important thing for us to consider about complex adaptive systems, and it's connected to the first point, and that is that when we try to optimize parts, it actually leads to the sub-optimization of the whole. So, we just need better and better and better and better teams, and you can optimize those teams, and you can have the best teams in the world, and that doesn't necessarily mean you've improved your capability to deliver value to your customers. In fact, it may actually be a detriment to your ability to serve the needs of your customers. And so the classic ancient parable of the blind monks and the elephant is probably familiar to most of our friends from the Eastern Hemisphere, and probably most of the rest of you as well are familiar with some version of this parable, but it's actually very ancient, and I believe it's from the Taoist teachings. And essentially it's that all of these monks are blind, but being monks, they take a lot of pride in the fact that they are very knowledgeable, well-educated, well-read. People come to them for advice about what they should do, and they provide this advice and so on. Now, what these monks are experiencing is an elephant as a whole, but because they're only focused on one part of the elephant, they actually believe that they are interacting with multiple different things. So, for example, the monk in the bottom left who's got his hand shoved in the elephant's ear, he thinks he's dealing with a fan, right? And he's like, no, this is a fan and we need to optimize this for this fan. And the one who's holding the tusk, well, he thinks it's a spear. So we gotta make this tool, this spear, we have to make the best use of it, and so on and so forth. So sub-optimization of parts does not, or optimization of parts leads to sub-optimization of the whole, because this system as a whole, these elephants and these monks, clearly are not doing very well, right? We're not getting what we need out of this elephant, or what this elephant is potentially capable of. All right, the next point about complex adaptive systems is that they are dynamic networks of interactions. So the relationships between the parts of this dynamic network, they're not aggregations of the individual static entities. So in other words, going back to my point about the school of fish, the school of fish doesn't behave like one giant fish. Just like this hive of bees doesn't behave like one giant bee. The relationships between these bees are multiple and varied and very different from how each individual bee functions. And so another analogy would be that, let's say a hungry bear were to attack this hive of bees. Well, in order to defend the colony, the bees wouldn't form themselves into a giant bee-shaped swarm, right? They instead would actually swarm the bear and come at it in multiple different ways, and stinging, and in order to adapt and survive, this system behaves much differently than any of its individual parts. Okay, so one last thing about this complex adaptive system is that the individual and collective behavior mutate and self-organize. So by nature, your organizations are doing this. They're mutating and self-organizing. Whether you're managing that or not, whether you're aware of it or not, it's happening around you all the time. It's doing its own thing. And it's doing so in order to adapt to the changes in environment and increase their survivability. And so, lovely example here from the Galapagos Islands is the blue-footed bobo. And these bobos have evolved and adapted to have these very lovely blue feet, and it is part of the adaptation for survival of the species, because what happens with these blue feet is that when it's mating season, the males actually do a very intricate dance, and the dance is basically, the purpose of the dance is to show off their blue feet to the female, and the youngest and healthiest and most promising mates, males, have the brightest, bluest feet. And so this mechanism has evolved over time so that this species can adapt and survive, and that the strongest, the best chance for survival is inherent to each generation. Okay, so then what about Kanban and SAFe? Well, we know that both Kanban and SAFe espouse the application of systems thinking as foundational. So everything we just talked about, complex adaptive systems, this is the foundation, the essence of systems thinking, and both Kanban and SAFe tell us that systems thinking is core to both Kanban and SAFe, okay? So we're gonna start by looking at how SAFe tells us to respond to complexity. Okay? And we're all very familiar with this. This is the SAFe big picture. I'm assuming that at least most of us are familiar with this graphic. This shows up on the front page of the SAFe website, and it's basically describing an organizational structure with the team level being foundational. So essentially agile teams going through these iterations and delivering and integrating their software periodically along this process. And the second level is described as the agile team of teams. So we've got a number of people here. This is, we could call this the program level. And this is everything that needs to happen in order to manage the work and the integration and the synchronization of the knowledge workers at the team level. And we call this in SAFe an agile release train because, you know, the train shows up at the station once every few months to load up on deliverables, and then off it goes and it comes back around again. Now we also have the large solution level, which is a more recent innovation of SAFe or evolution, you might say. We're not going to talk about that too much, and we're also not going to talk about the portfolio level so much, because really the core of SAFe is in here, the team level and the program level, and that's what most people have experience with in terms of implementation. So how do we start with SAFe? Well, it's very prescriptive and very specific. We train everyone and then we launch trains, okay? So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So SAFe is assuming that before SAFe comes along, we've got an organization of at least, let's say, a few hundred people. Often it's into the thousands, and they're following some kind of waterfall or, you know, water scrum, ad hoc agile. I'm not really sure what it is, right? And then along comes SAFe, and Go SAFe is basically the leading SAFe training for executives, decision makers, and okay, this is the tipping point, let's go, we're doing it. And then we train a bunch of people to be the change agents, and these are the people who become SPCs or SAFe program consultants, and then, you know, you become a scaled agile partner, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lean agile center. So this is kind of all happening in parallel, And then we train all the executives, managers, and leaders to make sure that they're all on board and aligned, and they're going to support these change agents. And then also we need these leaders to identify value streams and agile release trains, and there's a toolkit for that. You know, a whole pack of slides that tell us how to do this. And then we create an implementation plan. And then basically we do it more training and get ready to launch these trains. And then we train all of the teams that are going to be part of these trains. And then we do PI planning, which is for the first increment of delivery. And then from here, we're actually really doing SAFe. We've got these trains going, and so we're executing on SAFe, and we're providing coaching through the SPCs and other consultants, and then we grow it out to the portfolio. And when we get here, we're already starting here, but when we get here, once we get here, we've really realized these business results, right? So this is essentially the SAFe pitch, and it's compelling, and it's familiar, and it's very much in line with traditional 20th century approaches to change management. And so SAFe tells us that we need this, we need to do SAFe because it helps us solve a really big problem, right? So SAFe identifies the problem as we've got all of these handoffs between groups in the business, and there's lots of delays in these handoffs, political boundaries, which also cause delay. Essentially, all of these things causing delay. Geographical distribution, communication challenges, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to do something about that. And so, you know, SAFe, this is just basically another way of looking at the problem, right? Got a bit of a duplicate there, I apologize. So what is the solution? Well, it's this concept of value streams. And so what we want to do is we're going to organize our people around these value streams. So in SAFe, the SAFe definition of value streams includes the sequence of steps required for delivery, like in Lean, but they've also included all of the people who do the work, right? So that's an important feature of SAFe, because that leads us to the next part of the solution, which is this problem of, well, how do we organize around all of these people when they're all over the place, distributed? We've got these silos, political boundaries, challenge with communication, et cetera, et cetera. We dedicate people to these agile release trains, and we co-locate them. And if we can't fully co-locate them, then we at least bring them together for a few days every few months, right? Like physically together in the same room. And I took the training with Dean Leffingwell, who's the founder of SAFe, And he calls this the kidney because he was looking at an org chart of one of his clients, and he drew this shape to basically say, these are all the people that you're going to need on your release train. And then he kind of stood back and looked at it and said, hey, it kind of looks like a kidney, right? So, you know, it's sort of known as the kidney effect, right? In terms of a reorg around these release trains. So another way of looking at it, we've got these dedicated people to these dedicated trains. We've pulled them in from each of these functions. We've got this fully cross-functional team of Agile teams. And so we have everything and everyone we need within this new organizational structure to do all the work from end to end, concept to cash, and we don't need anyone else. We're fully independent, and we're just running these trains and we deliver. And in order to manage this new structure, we also introduce these new roles. So someone needs to be the release train engineer, right? In other words, the chief scrum master for this aggregated team. And we need a system architect to basically be the central point of governance in terms of the systems that are used and ensuring that everything is integrated into a single coherent solution. And we've got business owners that are kind of like Uber product owners or chief product owners. Product management is a group of these business owners and product owners who need to coordinate their work to provide guidance on what to build for customers. And the systems team provides processes and tools to enable the smooth integration of the work of all the teams. Okay, and then we've got Scrum Masters and product owners and developers and testers and all those other people too. Okay, got a few more slides about SAFe, and then I'm going to move on. I know that I'm taking time here to focus on details, but what's important to take away here is that all of these very specific prescribed features of SAFe. In other words, if you're doing SAFe, then this is kind of like the minimum set of things you need to be doing in order to say, okay, yeah, we're doing SAFe. So that's an important thing to take away from this. So we're going to launch the release train with what we call program increment planning, or PI planning. So this is the big event where we bring all of these people together into one room and we create a plan that we're committed to deliver as a whole and as a whole group of people in about 3 months or so from this planning meeting. And so, you know, there's some input, which is basically a program backlog of top 10 features is sort of the minimum top 10 features. And we pull those into the planning session. Then there's a whole set of sequence of activities, very specific and prescribed set of agenda items packed into a couple of days. And then the output of this is basically the plan. Okay, there are these steps. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. Again, this is to illustrate, you know, that there's quite a bit of specific detail in this guidance. So we need to make sure that we got the space, then and everyone is there. Then we enter the capacity for each iteration of the team. So each team has its own area set up, multiple teams in one room. Then the teams pick a feature, they estimate the feature, they create stories from the feature, they load the stories into the iteration because they've got multiple iterations in this plan, and they create objectives, identify stretch objectives and risks associated with the objectives and what they know and don't know. So at the end of this planning event, each team has basically a plan loaded up like this, right? So each iteration, they've loaded up with the features that they're going to deliver, and they've got a special thing to flag risks. And then they have these very specific names of the types of things that they're working on, right? So user story, maintenance, exploration, infrastructure, and risks. And then they've got their set of objectives here. And we're going to talk about this later, but basically they get a score from their business sponsor on the value of the objectives at the beginning, and then the actual value at the end is evaluated. Okay, we know about story estimation. SAFe prescribes planning poker. Planning velocity is calculated using the previous iterations. I don't need to go into that too much. Then, like I mentioned, they produce these objectives. They have a draft review. They present their review. Management makes adjustments. They go back and do another team breakout. This is when they get evaluated, and this is the agenda. You can see very detailed agenda for each day. And one last thing about estimation is that the points are aggregated. So teams estimate stories, and then these get aggregated into a feature, right? So all these stories aggregated here, and features aggregated to epics, and then these estimates of these epics are used by business executives to set higher goals and targets and longer term plans. Okay, great. So we've done PI planning. We got all these outputs from each of the teams. We integrate them into a single set of objectives, and we use this technique for managing dependencies between teams, literally physical string, right? So I can't pull this one too far until this one advances because it's dependent on this one, but then this one can't go because it's dependent on that one. So basically we use string tension to assess the severity of the risk inherent in each of the dependencies. Now we review the agenda at the end of PI planning. Or there's an agenda for the final review, and then we take a vote. So you know, as long as we get lots of fingers in the air, then we say, okay, good to go. We have a commitment, and off we go for 3 months, and we run this train. There are multiple events that are prescribed. You know, in here we've got the teams doing stuff, and then around that we kind of have this extra layer, bubble layer at the program level. And then we come back and we do inspect and adapt, and this is where basically we compare what we actually got, what the business actually got out of the objectives compared to what we thought we were going to get, and then we compare what we thought we were going to get with what we actually got, and then we calculated the percentage, our score, our achievement score, right? 45 out of 50 is 90%. And then what we can do is for each team, we can see how well they've done in achieving their goals over time, right? And this is how we measure the teams in the release train. And then we say, okay, teams, go and figure out how to make this better. And there's this prescribed set of activities that the team does, and they come up with solutions on how to be better, how to get a higher score next time. And these go into their backlogs as improvement items. Okay, weighted shortest job first. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but this is really like how we prioritize backlogs in SAFe, right? So essentially, relative return on investment, the biggest relative ROI goes first, and we stack rank them according to that. All right, so not much time to talk about Kanban, but with Kanban, we know we have a different approach. Evolutionary change. We start with what we do now. We agree to pursue evolutionary change, and we encourage acts of leadership at all levels. So this is how you start with Kanban, right? By agreeing to these set of principles. And then we have these service orientation principles. And so what are we trying to do, right? We're trying to get better at serving our customers' needs and expectations. We manage the work, we let people self-organize around it because they just will anyways because of the nature of complexity. And over time, we agree to evolve our policies, our working agreements, so that collectively we improve. So let's talk a little bit more about service orientation and how it differs from organizational orientation. So services are what we do for our customers. So it starts with sensing our customers' needs. Then we do something about it. We respond to our customers' needs. And then hopefully we fulfill our customers' needs. This is essentially what we do for customers. And the challenge, as we mentioned earlier, is that this system here is often opaque, lots of things hiding, and makes it very difficult to manage. So what do we do about that? Well, we know that our organization is a complex adaptive system, and that we use Kanban such that the complex system will be stimulated to improve. So in other words, we introduce Kanban as a stimulant. So those 6 principles, even just helping people think about those principles stimulates them to find ways to improve their complex adaptive systems. And even more, we have the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban, or static, and this is how we can be successful or more successful in this transition. This is quoted from Alexei Zheglov. So what is this systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban? Well, we start by understanding the purpose of the service. Who are our customers and what do they ask us for and why? Then we look at sources of dissatisfaction. What are our customers unhappy about with our service? What are we unhappy about? And what are the relationships between them? Then we look at demand analysis, going deeper into customer requests and expectations. What is our capability for delivering on these? Then we do some workflow mapping to say, okay, and now that we understand the requests that are coming in, how do they actually flow through our system? Then once we've done 1 through 5, we have enough information to think about how we can improve the design of the service delivery system. And then we socialize this design because we know we need to gain agreement in order for any of this to work. And this is an iterative process. We do it over and over and over. So let's start with the purpose of the service. The way that I like to frame this up is that we imagine that you have a store or a shop, and you've got other people in this shop working with you. And then there are these other people in your shop, or coming into your shop, coming and going and talking to you, asking questions, hopefully buying things, and hopefully happy about what they're buying. So we ask executives, who are your customers and what do they ask you for? And it is amazing how difficult it is for groups of executives to agree on their answer to this very simple question, deceptively simple question. So once we have an answer that we agree to, then we move on to sources of dissatisfaction. So we have both internal and external. And the internal ones tend to be like, well, I keep getting disrupted. I've got too much on the go. People are asking me to do things that, I don't really understand why or what's the value. The deadlines, I never have enough time. I don't understand what the business is asking me to do and why. And then we have these kind of corresponding sources of dissatisfaction. Now, these are just generic, right? You're gonna have to discover these on your own. But you can see how workers not available for support, it kind of correlates to the other side, which is disruptions, and then lack of focus, output not trustworthy, etc. And then we need to see, okay, well, actually, neither side is really the bad guy. There are systemic problems here, challenges and opportunities that are provoking these reactions from either side, right? So it's two different sides of the same coin, two different experiences of the same system. Very important to articulate and make explicit. Now, I realize I'm at the 41-minute mark. Just have a few more minutes, Mahesh, and then I'll be ready to take some questions. So with demand analysis, this is really the best way to frame it up. We kind of create this matrix. You can just put it up on a flip chart, and we have these columns. And so we identify the type of the deliverable or requests. These are the things that customers ask for. These are the types of things that customers ask for. And then where do these things go when we're ready to deliver? Often, or where do they come from? Sorry, the source, and then the destination, where do they go? Often source and destination are the same. What is the arrival rate of these requests? So for each type of request, how often do they show up in our inbound queue? And what is there a pattern that we can identify, or is it just random? And then what are the expectations that customers have of us when they make such requests? And we can really generalize these into 4 generic types of requests. So requests to add new things, requests to make changes to existing things in the product or the service, fix anything that's broken or not working properly, and then clean up our system to make it, to improve the capability. All right, then we look at the capability of the service, and really there are 3 most important things that we need to know and monitor and measure in terms of capability. So lead time distribution. How fast is our service and how predictable? Really important to know. Go and find the data and analyze it. How often do we release? And we see that we require capabilities in order to release more frequently, such as CI and CD. And then how often do we replenish? How often do we bring new things in and say, yes, we're going to deliver this? Workflow mapping is also a really important concept to grasp. Over time, we discover knowledge. And this discovery process follows stages. And it's also, these stages are also fairly generic, you know, analysis, build, test, deploy, for example. But when we have these transitions between these stages, there are actually shifts in dominant activity and collaboration patterns, and they're not handoffs between people and silos. So in other words, the work doesn't care about who's working on it. It just, when we manage the work, we're managing how these items, how these customer deliverables flow through our system, and it doesn't matter who's doing what or what department you're in. Right? These are artificial, dysfunctional organizational constructs, otherwise known as silos, departments, etc. Now we also don't blow them up and co-locate people and do a reorg. We just say, okay, we acknowledge that this is what's really happening with the work. Excuse me, I've lost my place. We acknowledge what's really happening with the work, and we go from there. And once we have all this information, we're ready to create the design. What is the design of our workflow? What are the designs of our work item types? The design of our tickets? These are customer recognizable delivery requests, right? Classes of service, WIP limits, pull criteria, and ticket design. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Okay, here's something that's important to know. How do we come about setting work in progress limits? Well, the answer is you set those limits based on what you need your system lead time to be, right? And your system lead time clock starts when you make a promise to a customer, right? So not when people actually start doing the work, rather it's when you say, we are going to deliver this, right? Clock starts ticking. Then the clock stops when you're actually ready to deliver it. You say, here you go, we're done. You can take delivery of this when you're ready, but we've done everything that is needed to do in order to deliver this to you. Here you go. That's your lead time. Each work item has a lead time between I promise and here you go. And all of the work in here is your current system WIP. So you limit such WIP and reduce those WIP limits in order to reduce lead time, in order to improve capability. In other words, stop starting and start finishing. I'm going to leave you with a bit of a teaser, potentially provocative. This is the topic of the next webinar in the series. To kind of do a two-part. Following this one, we do a Kanban maturity model seminar. And so Kanban is about stimulating your organization, your complex adaptive system, to evolve and mature through these levels of maturity. Okay. Customer driven is what you get when you do static, right? It enables you to mature from 0 or 1 and stimulates this level of maturity, the development of this level of maturity, customer driven. So my one little provocative thing about SAFE is that in terms of how deep it takes you on this development of organizational maturity, it basically gets you to team focus, and that's it. So here's the big, beautiful Kanban maturity model poster, Evolving Fit for Purpose Organizations, the topic of the next webinar. Thank you very much. I apologize for taking too much time, and Mahesh, back to you.
All right, thanks, Travis, for a very interesting presentation. Folks, if you have questions for Travis, please type them in your questions box, and we will take them in as they come in. Travis, a couple of questions that I suspect that many people on the webinar might have, and I hear that all the time in our prospective customer discussions when they are trying to figure out what is the best way to move forward when they're doing their enterprise agility initiative planning, is choosing between SAFE and Kanban, right? So they've heard of these two frameworks which appear perhaps quite different. Do you get that? Do you get that question? Which one should we go with, and what would be your answer to that?
Yeah. So I'm really glad you asked that question, because it kind of brings us full circle back to what I was trying to convey at the beginning, which is that it's probably not good to like, I wouldn't feel right about advising any organization to follow one framework or one method over another, right? I think what needs to happen is that organizations, leaders, managers need to take responsibility for improving delivery of services to customers. And if you believe, if as such a leader with such a responsibility, if your expectation is that implementing SAFE or some part of SAFE will enable you to do that better, right? To be a better and more successful manager, then please, by all means, give it a shot and find out, right? Run the experiment. And same thing with Kanban, except that, you know, this is kind of the Kanban approach, right? So as a Kanban consultant, I would never say to someone, don't do SAFE. Instead, I would say that's really interesting that you think that this might work for you. There's no way for us to really know right now, right? We can create we can design an experiment. We can state a hypothesis. You know, if we do this SAFE thing, release, train, whatever it is, reorg, then we expect the the outcome to be Y, right? We expect, and whatever those expectations are, people are happier, customers are happier, lead times, time to market has improved, quality has improved. Great. So now we have an experiment to run, and we can either, we can use data to confirm, validate, or maybe the outcome is not what we expected or not what we want, and so we can try something else. And so in a way, this is kind of the Kanban approach. But then the one last thing I have to say about this is that if you're already doing SAFe, actually two things. If you're already doing SAFe, then don't stop, right? Because the principle is start with what you do now. So we start with what we do now, we design an experiment, and we run the experiment, we see if we get the results that we expect. If not, we try something else. And the very last thing is, it's the definition, the Kanban definition of SAFe in 5 words. Right? So if as a Kanban expert, if I had only 5 words to tell you what SAFe is, using the language and the ideas from Kanban, it would be this: release train is a service. Okay, so we've got these. Let's say we have these release trains. We're doing SAFe. So how do we introduce Kanban, or how do we use Kanban to stimulate those release trains to improve? Well, we use the change management principles. We try something, see how it works. Then we use the service orientation, and we start to see these release trains as services, and then we do static. Release train by release train, service by service. We use static to help us stimulate these release trains / services to improve. Okay, I'm done with my answer.
Okay. So in fact, in a way, it kind of segues nicely into my other question, which is that in the Kanban section, you focused quite a bit on the static approach, which helps teams and customers, organizations understand who their customers are, what their problems are, or what are they asking them for, and really help them reevaluate their current services or workflows and obviously improve them. Whereas in the SAFe part, I guess you focused quite a bit on the PI planning and the details of that. But I think one of the challenges that SAFe organizations that are implementing SAFe face is in a similar activity, which is the value stream mapping, identifying the value streams and really figuring out what is the best way to organize their sort of thought process around those workflows. So do you see a similarity or sort of overlap there, or do you think that?
So I think if you're in an organization and you've already made the decision to roll out SAFe, and so you're following that roadmap, I think static, and I'm glad you mentioned this, because I think static can really help. You can inject it, right? So for example, when you're identifying the release trains, or in other words, what are the services we provide, by going through static at that point for each to identify the services or release trains, whatever you're calling them, and then to say, okay, well, this is what we do for our customer. These are the services we provide. I think that could help go a long way in helping the leaders think about their value streams.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So folks, I think we are going to have to stop here. We are only sort of nearly 10 minutes over the time limit. I'm going to share our contact information here. You're already seeing Travis's. And for those of you who are interested and would like to learn more or ask more questions of Travis, here is the contact information for both Travis as well as for Digite in order for you to connect with us. We'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. And also for any question that we didn't answer, we can certainly reach out to you and get back to you individually. In our experience, I think the ability for either SAFe or Kanban to help you scale Agile on the enterprise seems to have a tremendous amount of potential. And as Travis presented, depending on where you are and what you think are the sort of right signals in your organization, it's really up to the teams and to the leadership to decide which one you want to start with first, and you experiment. If you run short sort of experiments that give you quick feedback that help you make a decision on whether something is working for you or not, and then you adapt and improve based on that. Travis, thank you so much for the fascinating talk, and I hope that we can continue the series. You talked about the Kanban maturity model. I look forward to doing that for next. Folks, all of you who joined today, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to connecting with you after the webinar as well. A copy of the webinar recording will be made available to you in a couple of days in a follow-up email. And if in the meantime, if you have any questions, reach out to us anytime. Travis, thanks again. Wonderful.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.